All right,
Okay,
Greg.
perfect.
Thank you so much for taking the time to have a conversation with me today. I've known you for a long time. You're always posting really relevant content on recruiting, on sales. I think that's a really relevant topic for so many people. A little introduction, a little bit of background about you and about what you do.
Yeah, and thanks for inviting me, Seth. And
Sure.
great to talk to you. So, my name is Gregg Salkovitch. I'm the owner of a company called Right Choice Resources, and my whole background, I was a top sales performer for the first half of my career, and then just loved networking and helping people. Just did it naturally, and then decided to co-found a sales recruiting company. I just felt like it was the combination of what I love to do best, which is helping people and sales. So we grew that company from 2 to 60 employees in 6 years, and then
Wow.
started this company 7 years ago, where I started it myself. I'm full owner, and we help sales leaders and salespeople, as well as any go-to-market positions like account management and customer success people, find jobs.
That's fantastic. And it's a difficult process from both sides. You know,
It
people
is.
trying to find the next spot to move their career forward, and employers trying to get the right person in the door, which is so difficult. I think it's probably one of the hardest things to do in business.
It is. We have people all the time. I had a candidate the other day just said I've applied to over 400 jobs and I'm still not able to find one. And he's like, he thanked me for responding, and he just said nobody even responds. So it is. It's tough out there.
Yeah, and that's something that I think a culture shift needs to happen around the hiring and the recruiting process, and making it a little bit more human, a little bit more empathetic. It just seems like it's not anymore.
It's not. People just get ignored. Everything's through computer and automated. And to get a personal response, it made me sad. This individual just kept thanking me. He was so grateful that I responded, and I literally told
Hmm.
him, unfortunately, we don't have anything available for you right now." And he was just like shocked that I responded, and that's I mean, it's sad that we've come to that point.
Yeah, it is. Well, what have you seen in the market now? What's it? Because I know the market got a little tight last year, and things seem to have opened up. What does the market look like right now? And
It's been an interesting couple of years. So 2022 was like the year of hiring, where it was just crazy. 2023 was oops, we overhired. Let's start laying people off. That's what it felt like. And now 2024, I feel like it's back to normalcy.
mm,
But a lot of times, what we're seeing right now is that the companies that are hiring are looking for something very specific. Where in 2022 there was a lot of flexibility. Let's try to find best available athlete as long as they're good and
mm,
the skills are transferable. This year, a lot of times what we're seeing is if we're gonna hire, you're gonna find somebody who has industry experience, that's done this before, and we're open to hiring that person. So as far as business goes, our business is way up. But what's challenging is that somebody who is a really good salesperson that says, I don't have this exact experience, but I know it's transferable and I can do it. Some of these companies are just not open to them.
what's your perspective on that? Because that was something that I always tried to be open. I was able to scale a very successful sales organization,
Yes.
and
Remember,
every sales rep I hired had no prior experience in that industry. And
man,
I believe, especially in sales, I believe that it's very much a personality. Like, you either have the drive and the grit to make it happen, and if you do, then you have the potential to be successful given the right training, the right resources.
I
What's your perspective on that?
completely agree with that. I mean, I've been a top performer in recruiting. My background is in packaging sales, which I think is how we originally got in touch. So I started my own company because nobody would hire me. Nobody wanted a
Hmm.
packaging salesperson as a recruiter. That's why I had to start my own thing. So I'm completely come from the same cloth as you, where skills
Yeah,
are transferable, where you can teach them. Some of my best recruiters have come from logistics sales. I mean, one of them came from billboard advertising, who's really phenomenal. So I believe it can be taught. It's hard to teach somebody grit and
it
intelligence.
is.
It's to me, it's much easier to teach them how to learn a new industry.
Hmm. I favored athletes a lot, because
Yes.
if you have that drive to compete and to win, that is something that's inherent in you that doesn't really go away. What are some things that, like, if you looking past a resume, what are some of the traits that you look for in candidates that you found some success with?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Love hiring athletes. Just that competitive drive, the ability to work within teams, I think is huge. I placed one. This is several years ago. Completely the wrong background. Called the manager, said, "You're gonna have to trust me on this one." He was a college basketball player, and within 3 years, he was a top performer, making seven figures,
Wow.
and just absolutely was amazing. He just had the right DNA. I love retired military people
Hmm.
like that. I love individuals who self-funded college.
Hmm.
Those individuals are really interesting. People that have held summer jobs. Doesn't mean that if you haven't held a summer job that you are a bad candidate, but some of those individuals who have had to just work really hard in their entire lives and nothing was handed to them
Hmm.
seem to do really, really well.
Yeah, I think you're right, especially if you go through some sort of trauma or you've worked through something. Especially, you mentioned retired military. You go through that type of experience, and you come out a little bit more galvanized, for
And,
the workplace.
and you have perspective and you have
Hmm.
resiliency.
Yeah,
And
resiliency, I think, is such an important part that doesn't get talked about.
it is absolutely. I mean, if you can handle going through military training and going through a war, you can handle a job very, very
Yeah.
easily, in my opinion. So those individuals, I would say the best sales leader I know came from a very strong military background. He used to
Yeah.
defuse bombs in the military.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about nerves of steel.
I always say it was the best answer when I knew I got him the job is when they said, "Give me an example of how you deal with stress," and he gave the example of diffusing bombs. And I said that was when I knew he was going to get hired.
Yeah, I would have a hard time disputing that response.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. DNA is more important, in my opinion, than the
Yeah.
actual resume.
Okay. So, what do you think a reasonable interview process looks like in today's market? Because you hear stories of how it has become this circus show of hoops to jump through, and tests and rounds of interviews, and radio silence for periods of time. It dehumanizes it a bit.
It does. It does, and you have to set up the interview process beforehand. I know when we worked together, you had it down pat. You did a great job of it, of saying, "Here's the interview process.
Thank you.
Here's how it's going to be," and it was always consistent. There was always communication, which is why we didn't lose any candidates in the interview
Hmm.
process with you. But we just had this with a client. They just kept adding steps, and the
Hmm.
candidate eventually called me, and she was as nice as can be, and she's like, "If this is an indication of how this company runs, like this is
Yeah.
not a good fit for me." And they were ready to make her an offer, and she dropped out, and that's what happens. And she got cold feet because she's like, this. My worry is that if they haven't figured out how to interview people, that they haven't figured out things within their company,
Yeah.
and that
I
wasn't.
think that's a great point. That so often obviously depending on individual circumstances, but you sometimes overlook red flags in the moment. You look past them, and occasionally you have to believe what somebody's telling you. And like, if they don't have their act together, and it seems like the interview process is telling you that, they probably don't.
Exactly. I mean, there's not very many companies I know that really have the worst interview process ever, and then their company's awesome. I mean, usually there's a
Mhm.
correlation, not always, but
Sure.
usually there's a correlation. If good companies have good interview processes, and companies that have disorganized interview processes are a lot of times disorganized within their company. And there's always exceptions. Sometimes, it's new HR department, new employees.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I don't say that as 100% rule at all.
uh, I think it's an important point that if you are going to be hiring with any level of regularity, that you standardize what that process is and what it looks like.
Exactly right. Like
Everybody gets treated fairly.
exactly, you have the interview process, you have it defined. You're like, this is what it is. You don't add to it, you don't delete to it. You
Hmm.
manage your expectations of how long it's going to be. I always
Hmm.
recommend, under promise, over deliver. So if you're like, oh yeah, it's probably going to be 2 weeks, you tell them 3 weeks. And then if it's 2 weeks and the candidate goes, oh my gosh, it was only 2 weeks. Wow, they went faster, even faster than expected. And then sometimes delays happen. Sometimes the hiring manager has to, life happens and people have to travel out of town or something happens personal. And just being able to keep candidates in the loop and just saying, hey, I'm really sorry. Things are going to be delayed. Here's what's going on. I'm going to get back
Hmm.
to you early next week. And most candidates are super understanding, but what they're not understanding, to your point, is just completely ghosting and not hearing
Yeah,
anything. And I hear it all the time. I followed up with the hiring manager 3 times, and he or she didn't even respond. And that's how you lose good candidates, and also ruin your reputation.
for sure. Yeah, I think communication. There's no reason to have a lapse there, and there's you're not tipping your hand. You're not releasing power, but it's just good etiquette. It's
It
being a
is.
good human.
Yeah, and it's it takes no time, and you don't have to provide a 10-paragraph email. You can just say, we were hoping for an update today. Wanted to let you know that the VP of sales or a CEO or whoever it is, hiring manager, is doing some traveling, and I should know by early next week. Wanted to keep you in the loop. Have a great weekend.
Yeah,
That's all you need. It's very little.
yeah. Okay. Um, Very reasonable advice. I would think.
Yeah, it seems like common sense, but most companies we see don't do it.
Okay. What about applicant tracking systems? This is something I have very little experience with, but I know, especially with larger enterprises, it's kind of what they do for when it comes to recruiting. What's your take on utilizing that, and especially even with AI integrated in there? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So the applicant tracking systems, the thing is they're weeding out a lot of resumes, and people aren't even looking at them. And
Yeah.
that's what's tough, because if you don't have the right matching keywords, which is part of AI, it's just throwing that resume pretty much to the trash. Obviously, it still goes into the applicant tracking system, but nobody's really looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest way to do that, I mean, and I know it's time consuming, is you try to match the keywords of the job description with a key with your resume. And I know it's hard, because if you're applying to 100 jobs, they have to go through 100 job descriptions.
Yeah.
It could take forever. But that's one way to do it. The other thing that I recommend doing, which I don't see a lot of candidates doing this, is leverage your connections.
Mm-hmm.
If I just had this, I had a candidate reach out to me and say, I'm trying to get into this company. I've applied so many times. I've tried to contact people. I'm not having any luck. I see you're connected to a recruiter there. Can you help me? And I know this. I've known this woman. Her mom was my third grade teacher. She lives in my building. I mean, I have her phone number. I texted her and I said, hey, Sherry, can you interview this candidate? He's really good. He's been trying to get into your company. And next day he got an interview. And I know it's not always going to happen that way, but you can reach out to some people. Say, well, I don't have a huge network. I don't have maybe the network that you have or Seth has. And it's like, I didn't always have that network either. I mean, I reached out to people who are alumni of my college
Mm-hmm.
and said, like, hey, go Red Hawks. Hey, can you help a fellow alum? Here's what I'm looking for. So there's other ways to do it as well.
That's a really good point. I think so often people, they don't want to impose, they don't want to bother somebody, but when it's an email, when it's a quick message on LinkedIn, and you're not uh, trying to sell them on something with a cold email, then there's nothing wrong with that. If someone came to me and we have some connection of some kind, and I really believe in paying it forward, and people have helped me, and I try to do everything I can to help those that reach out to me, and you're right, I didn't always have a big network. It's something that you have to actively cultivate, and you have to go out of your way, put yourself in uncomfortable situations, and meet new people, and you
Exactly.
get to do it a lot, and it's not that bad.
It is, and you can meet them anywhere. I mean, that's what I
Mm-hmm.
mean. I just had breakfast with a woman. We're working on the same account, which is so random, and she's a woman I met in my spinning class. So it's like you can meet, and she's incredibly connected, and so you can meet people anywhere. You just have to extend yourself out there, and you post on LinkedIn, and
Mm-hmm.
you reach out to people cold. And even if you don't know them, send an email to who you think is a hiring manager, and introduce yourself, or make a call into them. What I love
Mm-hmm.
doing too is, if you're familiar with Vidyard,
Yeah.
is like create a video and send them a video. And I'm curious, if you had anybody, you've been a leader for many years. I mean, have anybody ever created a video for you and said, like, hey, Seth, I'm Gregg Salkovitch. I'm really interested in this position.
um no, I've
I
never.
mean, isn't that incredible? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
think about how many people have applied to your jobs, and you've interviewed and you've hired,
Yeah.
and not one. So it's just a way to stick out. But if somebody did that to me and created a really personalized video,
Mm-hmm.
and said, "Hi, Seth, I'm Gregg Salkovitch. Go Phillies. I see that you're a Phillies fan. Good luck with opening day." And they made something personalized and said, here's the reason why I'm reaching out. And they had good energy. Would I reach out to that person? 100%.
In
They
a
created a
heartbeat.
custom
Yeah.
video, 100%. I would respond to them.
That I think that's a really good point. Is if you want to stand out from the pack, well, then do something to stand out. And we all have the ability to, hey, here's my phone with a professional level video camera on it.
Yeah.
I can shoot a quick video and do something that stands out. Especially if you go through the effort to do a little bit of homework and make the content that you put in that video relevant to the person you're sending it to.
Exactly. And I think that's the most important. You have to make it custom. I've had ones where it's like, hey, I'm like, okay, I can tell they interviewed it's 1,000 people. But yeah, you just have to get creative. You have to be able to, I love LinkedIn. So, you have to post on LinkedIn, ask for help. You have to be able to look through and be like, hey, I'm really interested in this company. Who do I know that is a first degree connection there that I know directly? Maybe that works there, or a second degree where maybe I don't know them, but Seth knows them. If Seth knows the CEO and I can reach out to Seth and say, Seth, can you help me? I'm trying to get into this company. And sometimes when you don't, like you said, just get creative with it and create a video. Or, if you really want a job, like if I sent something like a handwritten note to you, right? Or sent something that was like little, I see your Phillies hat in the background, but sent something about like a little Philadelphia Phillies something, right? Keychain. I'm just making it up.
Yeah.
Like, I'm probably going to at least get a response from you, something little.
It's funny. Everything you're saying sounds a lot like some of the sales training that I've done.
It's exactly right.
It's what it is. You're selling yourself.
Exactly right. I mean, that's my whole background in sales. So that's how I got into sales recruiting. It's like, I'm like, well, I really am passionate about recruiting, and I know sales, and I think recruiting is very much like sales, and it is.
It is.
The average job posting receives 250 resumes. And if you have 250 resumes, let's say they're not even going through an applicant tracking system, they're just sitting on somebody's desk.
I've gone through thousands of resumes, and this is something that, and maybe that's part of why I've always been so specific with candidates that I end up hiring, is because I do look at every resume that comes in, and yeah, I don't want to use keywords to filter something out, and I think from the hiring side, so from an employer company side, I think you owe it to yourself to take that extra time to go through the resumes and not rely on a computer. It's the cost. We did some like back in the napkin math at Wharton a couple weeks ago, and it was like 200 to 250% of annual salary to replace somebody.
Yes, it's huge.
That is ridiculous in terms of an opportunity cost. Take the extra time to hire the right person.
I know, and you're not even figuring in, like, if you made a bad hire, not only is that cost, but now you have to go find somebody else. You have to hire them. You have to train them. You have to manage them. You have to go through all those interviews. I mean, it's so time consuming for you. So you're also, you're not necessarily even figuring in that you have to do all of this while doing your current job, which is incredibly stressful.
Yeah. What do you think are some ideas or best practices on the employer side to try and make the hiring process a little bit better for everybody involved, be more productive, not be as taxing?
Yeah, one thing that one of our clients did, which I thought was awesome, so shout out to Justin Clifford, is that whenever he would interview a candidate, which I love that he did this, is he would, right before the day before the interview, he'd send them a quick note and he'd just say, "Hi Seth, just want to let you know I'm really looking forward to meeting you tomorrow, and have a great day, and we'll talk tomorrow." And I thought it was such a nice personal touch, and people were so excited to go talk to him, because what a great way to start. And I didn't see that. I don't see that very often. I thought that was a great personal touch. But I think the other thing that's really important is that you have to make them feel like this is a partnership. This is not just I'm lucky to have you as much as you're lucky to have me.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of companies don't do that, but it's just they have to set the interview process. They have to be communicative. They they have to make sure that they're just not asking questions, that they're also getting questions back from the candidate. And I
Hmm.
think the biggest thing, we're talking about like the sales is that, I have, I see every interview of like, it's not just you having to sell me. I have to sell you as well. This
Hmm.
goes both ways. And I feel like a lot of times it's not.
Yeah. Here's a little bit of my secret sauce, and I think this worked really well on a number of levels. Um, when I would have somebody that I would bring them in for a second interview,
Mhm.
um, before I would meet with them, I would prep them. I would let them know like, um, I want this. I want you to drive this interview, and I
Mhm.
want you to come prepared to interview me and ask me questions about
Mhm. It's
the
great.
company, the position, anything that you want to know. And it was very intentional because I believe to this day I would get significantly more information and more valuable information from a candidate based on the questions that they asked, the type of
Mhm.
questions that they asked. You get more of an insight into what actually matters to them, what's really driving them to want this job or not. you know.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And it shows their inquisitiveness. It shows that they listen
Hmm.
because they're going to give responses. You see how they follow up. I think it is. And so many of these candidates have been interviewed so many times. They know exactly
Yeah.
what you're going to ask, and they know exactly how they're going to answer.
Hmm. Yeah. You can ask a question that you think is clever, and maybe it is, but the response is going to be it's going to be skewed because they're trying to give you the answer you want to hear, that they believe you want to hear. Um,
Mm-hmm.
when they're asking the questions, that it's a different thought process.
Mm-hmm.
They're not engineering their words the way that they would if it was an answer.
Exactly. 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 Yeah, it is. I mean, I remember when I was going through interviews, I used to always say I used to feel like I'm in the play where I'm just
Mm,
waiting for them to say their line and then I'm going to say my line. And when I was in MBA school, we did mock interviews and they recorded me. And I remember the feedback. I'll never forget this because it always stuck with me. And it was many years ago. Is they're like, you have an answer for everything. They're like, you have and they go, and it's starting to look like it's insincere because you have such a fast answer for everything. Because I was asked
oh,
the same thing a million times. I knew exactly what I wanted to answer. So I
yeah.
had like really practice my pauses and acting like I was thinking about it, even though I
Hmm.
already knew what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And but that's what happens when you get to ask the same question. So I love that you flip it. And we have
Hmm.
one client that literally this is how he starts his interview. He doesn't warn them. He goes, "Seth, great to meet you. So today you're going to be interviewing me. So why don't you tell me what questions you have?" And it puts them on the spot big time. But some of them freeze and some of them adjust really well.
Yeah. That's interesting that he flips it right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Um, I can imagine like as a candidate walking into that, being like, "Wait, what?" Just completely unprepared for that.
Yeah, completely unprepared. Yeah, so some of them crumble, and some of them think quickly on their feet, and they start to ask questions, and they're like, "Oh yeah," or they'll say like, "Oh, I do have some written down. I wanted to make sure I asked you." So
Okay.
it's interesting. But I agree with you. You can learn a lot.
Yeah.
Another one that I thought was like really interesting that we had not too long ago was one of our clients declined our client, or one of our clients declined our candidate. So he interviewed him and sent a message, "Hey, we don't think it's a fit," and he wrote this really nice email about why he should be reconsidered, and they ended up hiring him, which I thought was really
Really?
great. And and it was very much they were like they didn't do it, it wasn't done strategically, but they're just like we want to hire somebody that has that motivation and they don't give
Hmm.
up. And they're like, how can we not take a chance on a guy that does this? And I thought that was really a neat story.
Yeah. He got his shot.
Exactly. And he did it, and he did not do it pushy. It wasn't salesy. It wasn't
Hmm.
manipulative. It was just like, hey, I respect your decision, but I want to share some things with you and why I would love the opportunity to be reconsidered.
That's
So
cool.
very, very well done.
What do you think about employee retention? What are some really good best practices that are just kind of table stakes of do these things to make sure that your employees stay and you don't have to replace them?
Gosh, there's so many different things. Um, yeah, it's interesting. Since COVID, I mean, obviously compensation is always important, but just being able to
Hmm.
like treat them well and the empathy and showing flexibility has been so much more important. It's interesting. Like there's a lot of people that are less concerned about money and more interested in how they're treated within companies.
Yeah.
I think that's one really big thing with companies working remotely. Being able to show a good culture. As
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing more people work remotely, I think it can get lonely working from home. Some people can do it, some can't.
Mm-hmm.
We do weekly trainings. We also do weekly lunches just to get everybody involved. The opportunity for advancement and promotion, I think, is really important. Opportunity for recognition, just
Mm-hmm.
being able to say, good job. It's amazing how many people I talk to who are getting paid like really well. I mean, I talked to a candidate the other day, $700,000. I mean, it's so much money, and she's like, I want out. She's like, I don't feel appreciated. That was her big thing.
Yeah.
And making, she knows she's not going to go somewhere else and make that kind of money, and she's looking to get out. If her boss would give her a simple thank you and recognition, it wasn't even about the money.
Mm-hmm.
I would say those are I would say probably the majority of the things, and just as you said before, with everything, just good communication and being upfront.
Yeah. And that's like my next thought is especially in sales, I think it's incredibly demotivating, irrespective of how you go about it, to alter a compensation plan.
I do too, and I'll tell you the other thing that really I've seen this a lot lately that really upsets people because we talked about the market going back up. Is Seth is my loyal employee. He's killing it. He's my number one go-to guy. And I go hire this new employee, and Seth is making $100,000. I go hire this new employee with no experience at 120.
Yeah.
And it we'd like to say, oh, it's confidential. You're not supposed to be discussing salaries. It gets found out. I mean, people can go to Glassdoor,
Yeah.
people talk. It's just how it is. And then Seth finds out, and he goes, "You've got to be kidding me! Like
Mm-hmm.
I've been busting my behind here, and you're going to hire this new person who you want me to help train and pay them $20,000 more than me." And that's been like a super hot button lately. And people, I think they quit not because of the money, but just because of the feeling of not feeling appreciated, where you're going to not take care of your loyal employee, but you're going to take care of your person that hasn't worked for you for a day.
Yeah. And that's, there's been studies where people will game that, they'll leave so that they can then come back, get rehired, and make more money. Because that's how they view the path forward. That's the only way to do it. And I think that's a really great point, that you have to provide the opportunity to help build someone's career. If not, that's fine. Just make sure that they're aware that this isn't the place to do that. And you got to be fair about compensation. I don't believe in being opaque about it, especially if you're not in a performance-based role. If you're fundamentally doing the same thing, you need to make sure that they're fundamentally getting paid for what they're doing.
100% agree. When I interview people, I kind of call it like the negative sell. When I interview people to work for me, and I'm like, here are the bad things about working for us. Like, I mean, I'm just like very, very honest with it. And there's nothing that's so horrible, right? But I'm like I say, like we're a remote company. We get together X number of times a year. So if you want an office setting, like we're not it. We're a small company. If you're looking to rise up the corporate ladder, you're and I tell them the good things too. Like we have a great culture. You're going to be treated really well. But here's the things. I mean, if you're looking to be a manager in the next 2 years, it's probably not going to be a good fit for you.
I like that a lot. I used to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And because you want to make sure that they understand what they're getting themselves into, and there, if there's something that is so bad that you'd be embarrassed to tell a potential hire, there's a fundamental shift that you need to make and fix whatever that problem is.
Exactly. And these companies, I see it all the time where they, like you said, they might mislead people on compensation, or they might not tell them something with the company. And then what happens is that everybody loses, because that you might be able to hire that person, but eventually they just get upset. They quit. Now you're having to replace them. Now they're smearing you on social media. It doesn't help anybody. You're just better off being honest and saying, here's what it is.
Yeah. I think, I look at it a little bit like you wouldn't treat a client, the same way that some candidates get treated. And you want to make sure that there is a level of transparency, because in theory, you're hiring them for the long term. There's someone that is going to be with you and your company. They're going to be executing on all the grand visual, plans you have, and make sure that you're bringing the right person in, because the effort to replace them or to make up for a bad hire, and the opportunity cost that goes with it, it's just so high.
It is, and I can't execute with our clients without having a team behind me. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
I can't do the job. So I mean, they're super important.
For sure.
Yeah,
Greg, this was a great conversation.
yeah,
I,
really
I,
enjoyed
I'm
it. That was great to catch up with you.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I'm so grateful that you made the time to do this, and definitely going to get a lot of value out of this conversation for sure. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for inviting me. It's great to catch up with you.
Yeah, absolutely.